All right, so a little bit of housekeeping. Uh, this is a Microsoft event. I'm not going to drain this slide, but in a nutshell, follow the golden rule. Please be nice to each other, be polite. And if you have any issues, you can let us know either in the chat or you can reach out to us at this email or this phone number here. We will be sending out emails afterwards to everyone who registered. We have in these emails, we'll make some announcements about future webinars, any specific government product updates. You can always opt out if you don't want to be part of that anymore. And I'm going to just admit. There we go. So what we can do here, if you have questions during Douglas's presentation, you can use chat. At the end, we will open up people's microphones and you'll be able to raise your hand and come off mute and ask questions. The Q&A portion will not be recorded. So feel free to ask any questions then if you want to wait until that recording is done. We do have a GitHub repo. You can go to this AKAMS/Fed BA link. There you'll find white papers, sample code, and of course, all of our past webinars will be posted there. And that's where you'll find today's recording posted in a couple of days. So for today, the agenda is I'm going to do some announcements, then I'll introduce our speaker, then he'll speak, and then we'll stop the recording and have a Q&A at the end there. So again, welcome. As far as announcements go, I just want to quickly touch on some local events here in the DC area. If you're not from the DC area, don't worry, I have some suggestions as well there. The first is tomorrow night, there's a virtual Power BI DC user group meetup. That is the link there. I'll post these links in the chat as well. In-person event coming up in July, we'll be having the Dynamics User Group Northeast Regional Meetup at the Microsoft offices in Arlington. I encourage everyone in the DC area to come out for that. It's a day-long free event. I'll be speaking. We have a lot of great speakers, some from Microsoft. There'll be two tracks, one for Dynamics Customer Service and Power Platform, and the other for Dynamics Business Central. If you're interested in getting involved in more community events, these are just some of the user groups that we have available. One is a government meetup for all of Microsoft 365. The other is a M365 group based in the DC area. And then there's a Power Platform user group that I'm involved with. And last but not least, you can find more events both in the US and around the world at communities.org, which is a great clearinghouse for all types of events related to Microsoft. So definitely recommend bookmarking that and checking out all the fun events that are coming. Some are free, some require a registration fee. So again, welcome everyone. We are about to kick off here. If you're just joining. Again, my name is Jamie Willis-Rose. I'm a senior technical specialist at Microsoft Federal. I've been here since October 2021. Last year, I got to go to the Power Platform Conference in Orlando, where I met our speaker tonight, Douglas Hubbard. Douglas is a manager at Transport Canada. He gave two amazing, I think it was two, maybe three, amazing sessions in Orlando about his group's work with the Power Platform. I was inspired by his presentation, and I've made it a point to get him in here to talk on this webinar. I realize some of you are U.S. government, and you may think, why am I allowing somebody from Canada to talk? But I think you'll find that it is very relevant. He works in a government or highly regulated space, and I think his lessons that he's learned will resonate. So Douglas, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Jamie. I appreciate you and your team giving me the opportunity to speak today. Those of you out there who I have not met before, my name is Douglas Hubbard. As Jamie mentioned, I am the manager of the Power Up Center of Excellence in Transport Canada. We are indeed a Canadian federal government organization. However, I hope that the information I'm going to talk about today will resonate with you, because I suspect that there's a lot more we have in common than in terms of differences, especially in the parameters of operating in the government space. It isn't the same as the private sector at all. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did in the public space. As the title says, the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of a power platform COE in the federal government sphere. That is admittedly quite a mouthful, but it tries to convey what we're going to talk about here. And frankly, it's got that long-winded aspect of it that's so suitable for government discussions. Let me start first by giving you my goal today is I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of context and background, and then I'll move on to hopefully the meat of the conversation for you, which is what we've dealt with so far. So what we've dealt with, and then where we're going in our successes and challenges. So very quickly, a little bit about Transport Canada for background. It's a federal institution. We're responsible for, as it says, transportation policies and programs. So we don't do the nitty gritty, but at the federal level, it's all about the safe, secure, and environmentally responsible transportation across the nation, coast to coast to coast. Our peculiar difficulty is that we have the second largest land area in the world, but we're somewhere around 30th in the population. So we have a lot of infrastructure challenges, right? We have to make sure we reach across some pretty difficult areas, tundra, desert, you name it, with not a lot of people. So that creates a lot of challenges. We're also a medium-sized government organization by the size, by Canadian standards anyways. We have roughly 7,000 employees. So a little bit about the Power Apps Center of Excellence. That's what we're going to talk about here. We have some exposure to Power Platform as a whole, but the majority of our work is in Power Apps. And I think before I get any further, I should probably mention that my name, as I said, is Douglas Hubbard, and I have had the opportunity to speak before and get the elephant out of the room. I have this very odd voice. Your microphone is indeed working properly. I have this very odd voice because I actually have stage 4 cancer, and I am missing half of my vocal cord along with 30 other odd bits and pieces and sods. I'm only telling you this because I'm actually very excited that Jamie again welcomed me back even after he saw me present in Florida, because this is my way actually of getting out there and telling cancer to get stuffed. So again, I apologize if any of you are having difficulties hearing, but it's not you. This is me talking. So a little bit about Power Apps, or PACE, I should say. We were established about 3 years ago to support the effective use of Power Apps throughout the department, because we did a very successful undertaking in a project using Power Apps. So our executive was willing to give us a chance to see if we could use it more department-wide. We started with a team of 4, myself and 3 really great people, and we've been, at the risk of sounding conceited, incredibly successful. And now we're up to 10 people, and we're trying our best to meet demand, and it's keeping us pretty busy, frankly. Now, what does PACE do?
If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the PACE team.
Our philosophy all along has been, we want to teach people how to fish. I have the very best people I can possibly ever ask for actually in PACE, but we're never going to be the only source of Power Apps or Power Platform, so we try to show people the way. Over time, we've acquired 3 major areas of responsibility inside the team: governance infrastructure, professional development, citizen development. So I'm going to touch briefly on what those are before we get into the lessons learned and the success stories. Our governance and infrastructure runs the gamut of how do we get to have this new incredible technology work well in the department. And I don't think it's harsh to say, and I imagine it's the same for those of you out there as well, we're not known for being the most cutting edge in the government, perhaps a little risk averse, shall we say. So getting people on board for something that was, for us, very shiny and new was a big part of it. How do we look after it? How to regulate it? Moving to the cloud instead of on premise. There's a lot of worries, a lot of things going on that we help with. We help with the infrastructure. We help establish how things work. We look after the infrastructure in some senses. We look after the Power Apps platform tenant, for example. We work with IT security and enterprise architecture, try and come up with good solutions, good approaches. Good example there that comes to the top of my mind is that our traditional approval process is a 5-gate approach that well, can take several months to go through. And we're encountering situations where apps are being built in 5 or 6 weeks, and there's not a lot of appetite to take 4 to 6 months to get the approvals for that. So we worked with them to come up with a much more streamlined system. Professional development. Now we could split that into two possible categories. The professional development, on the one hand, is going back to teaching people how to fish, is about helping them build better systems. We give them guidance, we give them examples. Someone on my team, for example, built a template that adapts a government standard template for web pages, which is following all the rules for compliance and that sort of thing, including accessibility, and adapted it so it worked with Power Pages. And we shared that so they didn't have to reinvent the wheel. The second thing that we're very involved with is actually developing things for the department. And sometimes beyond, the team was actually grabbed at a couple times during the COVID days to do things that were necessary for the entire government of Canada Treasury Board. But getting back to the professional development part in general, we get approached by people who have a big problem and they need it fixed, and they usually need it fixed fast. So we're the group that gets called in to try and solve difficulties that have popped up, I should say, or sometimes folks are still using systems that are decades old, no exaggeration. We had somebody who came to us with a system that was built in 1998 and they'd never been able to have it replaced until now. So we try to help folks out like that. Citizen development. Now, not everybody is using citizen development in your department, or you may not think so, but you probably are, even if you don't know it. So we realized that the best thing to try and do was create a situation where we encourage citizen development and make sure we can keep an eye on it. So that's a very big role for us. We come up with scenarios, we come up with rules, we come up with policies, things that make sure we guide the citizen development as much as possible in the direction we want it to go. Because one good thing about all this is that at least if you set it up, you can keep an eye on it. We can watch their activity in the default tenant in our playground. Whereas how many Excel spreadsheets are out there with mission critical information sitting on a shared drive and we have no idea what's going on with it? Or worse yet, there's probably copies of it used by every user in the different teams. So we make it as appealing, shall we say, as possible to get those folks engaged and working with us, because at least then they're not developing it in a total shadow IT scenario. So, excuse me, let's get down to the meat and potatoes of this presentation. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the successes and lessons learned in the context of where we've come from before. I was going to split into two things, but the truth be told, they're often mixed together. Our lessons learned are combined very much so with most of our successes too. Very first thing is how big is the bread box? What I mean by that is if you haven't established a center of excellence yet, which I strongly encourage as a way to use Power Apps well in your organization, is what would be the goals for your center of excellence? What's it going to cover? Will it have professional development as part of it? Will it only do governance activities and not involve the citizen developer? It's good to know what it is you're trying to accomplish. And beyond that, how big is your team going to be and how is it going to fix those problems? So in terms of our lessons learned, or success stories, if you like, is that we didn't originally engage in citizen development. We realized very quickly that was super important. We also weren't planning on doing professional development as a big focus of our COE. Truth be told, it is what, however, pays the bills, in the sense that we were not funded for that first year. And through the doing of building incredible systems for people, that's how we got paid. And it also helps us justify our budget, and then we can point to these specific things that we're accomplishing that have direct impact on the organization. We have succeeded as well, though, doing what I'd call second order economics in showing how we're also reducing risk. Again, we're a government organization. It's not about profit. If you can show that you're minimizing or possibly even eliminating the risk that manifests itself with an old system with very poor data integrity, no reporting capabilities, very vulnerable to access to information or legal requests that you have no way to formulate the responses, and replace it with something that meets all of those things and have fantastic analytics because you've plugged in Power BI, that gets people happy. And we all know, I think, in this sphere of government, that executives love their charts and data and power and analytics. So that's a good selling point. Tied into all of that is enterprise licensing. One of our biggest successes early on was we were able to get the backing and make a case for buying at the department level as a whole. Up until that time, we have projects, capital projects, building large-scale systems for the organization. Each one of them was buying licenses a la carte. Project I was working on, NWAR, Navigable Waters Act Renewal, it was actually the first one out of the gate. It was the first serious, real system to be used by the department and Power Apps. And that was about 300 licenses, 300, 300, 400. And the other two teams that were coming after us were buying similar numbers of licenses. And it became very quickly buying them 300 at a time was a really bad plan. We could buy 3,000 of them and get a better deal. So I would strongly encourage you, in terms of a really good plan, is that if you can do it, figure it out. What could you buy that would try to support your entire organization? Get a nice discount for volume. That's not a secret. And then you avoid having to nickel and dime yourself. It also provides an incredible benefit of that. If you get, say, the Power Apps per user license, you've created a situation where that one license, the more Power Apps you have, the better a deal it is. And I can't speak to the American situation, of course, but I would say that from our perspective, it's on sovereign soil, so it meets our protected B security classifications. And the cost for running the cloud was looking quite favorable, actually, to trying to run all our on-premise servers. A corollary to that, however, is that while our Power Apps per user licenses have been incredibly successful, we're realizing that some of the attachments, say field service, customer service, while they're wonderful in terms of the capabilities they provide, you better consider what your long-term maintenance obligations are now going to be. If you have 500 of those and you're looking at several $100,000 a year in maintenance, perhaps a better solution would be to, well, bite the bullet, so to speak, pay for the extra resources to build something that emulates those capabilities, and then you cut down on your maintenance. Front-end load, so to speak, is simply that hundreds of thousands of dollars a year is a difficult line item to justify. But overall, enterprise licenses, great idea. Similarly, the right tool for the job. There's Power Apps in terms of model-driven, in Canvas, in Power Pages. They all have a role to play. We're finding Power Pages. We're just starting to use Power Pages now compared to the amount of volume we have in Canvas and model-driven. And we're again discovering that it's a decent choice for the right situation. But if you can build it with .NET Core feeding model driven, maybe that's the way you want to go. I'm hopefully nobody in Microsoft's going to cut me off for this, but I'm told that that they don't mind that too much. Is that the reason why I say that is that you're paying for monthly usage, and if your situation for external users is such that it's very cyclical, which happens a lot in transport because people are making applications for boats, for something very seasonal anyways. So you get these 1 or 2 month periods with a huge spike in usage, and then it drops down into next to nothing. If you have to buy a monthly capacity and the systems don't oblige you by making every single one of them line up for different 12-month, different couple month periods, well, guess what? Now you have this huge spike that you're paying for the whole year around. So for the right system, it's a great idea. If it's got a steady usage, for example, it definitely has its benefits, but something to keep in mind. And corollary to that, do your best to make sure that you're using Canvas and model driven in the right situation. Canvas is a wonderful, wonderful and tempting tool for how much you can customize and that sort of thing, but that's not necessarily an asset. Canvas is good for purpose built. There's an app for that, put it on your phone. But model driven is the heavy lifting, the really powerful one that lets you build incredibly flexible and capable systems. If you do that, though, avoid the temptation to customize, because my goodness, we've had situations where people are starting to build Canvas apps inside model driven just so they can have the buttons look certain ways and that sort of thing. Our experience and the advice I can't emphasize enough is try to resist that temptation. The whole beauty of Power Apps, low code, especially model driven, is you can configure almost everything. Yes, you'll occasionally have to customize. You'll have to write some APIs and that sort of thing. But customizing the user interface is not what I'd suggest is the best way to go, because you're working against the purpose of that system. You've got a consistent, it works. I mean, I wouldn't say it's the most exciting UI I've ever seen, but you know what? It's consistent. It works. And if everybody keeps staying it that same way, your maintenance costs just dropped significantly. Your development time drops significantly, and nobody's going to be confused how to use a Power App because they know what it looks like. Knowing your audience, that covers two things off the top of my head. One is if you're still trying to make your center of excellence or you want to keep your center of excellence, make sure that you're understanding what it is your executive, what your leadership wants. I always think of it as I'm in the same building as those important, worthy people, but I'm looking down or I'm looking at, say, a parade going down the street, Macy's parade, if you like. I'm on the 4th floor. They're on the 38th or 58th floor, whatever it may be. We're looking at the same thing, but we're not seeing the same thing. So any way you can make sure that you're pitching yourself to being strategic that actually acknowledges the organizational requirements is a plus to you. I know nothing I'm saying here is rocket science, but it's amazing how many groups I've run into that they have never been able to get off the ground. So I wanted to mention that. The second audience group I want to touch on right now is citizen developers. Citizen developers, by and large, in our experience, have been very motivated, very eager, very interested people, but they're not IT. They're very, very different. So whatever your plans are, whatever your strategies are, you're going to need to tailor it so that your professional developers, you have one stratagem, and your citizen developers, you have another. Their expectations, everything, it's start to finish, very, very different. One of our successes was very early on. We found a citizen developer out in our Atlantic region, and we actually brought them over to Pace. They worked with us for 9 months. They picked up a lot of useful Power Apps knowledge, and we really got a much better insight into what makes a citizen developer, a non-IT person, tick, so to speak. And we were really able to adjust our training materials and our guidance to suit, and it's really helped improve our support for citizen developers. Accessibility, I just want to touch on that one in that some groups have difficulty with accessibility and some platforms have difficulty with accessibility, but we're really finding that Power Platform, again, used properly, really a big success for accessibility. And that's a good reason not to customize your interface in model driven, because out of the box, guess what? It's WCAG AA 2.0 AA accessible compliant, I believe it is, but I'm not in tech anymore. So it's accessible compliant. We can make our stuff follow all the rules set by our federal government. And same thing with Canvas. It's got that wonderful validation tool right built in there. Power Pages is a bit trickier, but you can certainly make it happen. So that's a success. COE Toolkit, my goodness, that has been such a beneficial option for us. We've put that in. I'll be honest with you, we're not using all facets of it by any means yet, but we're using more of it all the time. The biggest thing that's helping us with is when I was talking about earlier about we keep an eye on the citizen developers. We can really keep a close eye on what's going on in that default tenant. Somebody creates something, we can see it. We can watch how many people are using it. So our big thing is that you're welcome to create your own little environment and try out whatever you want in Power Apps or Power Platform in general. But the rules are you cannot do anything with live data, production data, and you absolutely cannot have other people use it. We've had a few people misunderstand because there's only 3 or 4 people in their group. There's no reason why they can't go to production with something. And we've worked with them to make sure they understand you cannot do that. We also do not we're not okay with citizen developers using Power Pages. The reason behind that is it's much more complicated. There's no way to build a Power Page right now without having to know the level of knowledge that would be suitable to, say, writing in JavaScript. That's not where we want to go with citizen development. We want to encourage them to use no-code solutions where as much as possible. The other factor is that for us anyways, if it's in Power Pages, it's public facing. And if it's public facing, you automatically scaled up the level of risk by a huge number, because now you have the public seeing it, and you better make absolutely sure it's robust, follows every single standard, and in our case as well, is fully bilingual. These things all add up to being, it's just not a good fit. If somebody wants to do something that's external facing, then they'll work with us for a different approach than just pure citizen development. COE Toolkit, while I think of it, if any of you are familiar with it, there's the Power Cap maturity model. It's taken us, I won't lie, it's taken us 3 years to get where we are. But our floor level now in that is the 300 range. We've got some high threes, we've got some 400s. I think we've even got one thing that I'd say proudly we're in the 500. And the toolkit has really helped us. Getting that toolkit in place really helps you with a high level of maturity and lets you be much more proactive. So I can't sell that one enough. Fusion teams. We've had a few really big successes with fusion teams. So we get the citizen developers, they've got a problem, maybe the team's got a problem, and we can recognize that it's just not going to be a good fit for someone who has ambition but no professional development experience. Say it needs Power Pages, going back to the previous slide. So getting a professional developer from PACE and somebody who wants to be a citizen developer working together has been a fantastic success. We're seeing that they cover a lot of the slack that we cannot provide necessarily to our availability. We're finding that we're getting a lot more done, and it creates somebody with enough knowledge that the maintenance can often be more on their side. That creates a sense of ownership, and they're very excited about that. A corollary to fusion teams is that we're doing something that I call embedded developers, where if we're building a system for PACE to try and forestall there being an ongoing maintenance burden that keeps increasing for our organization, by organization I mean PACE team specifically, we bring in a developer from the shop that would normally be responsible for maintenance. Or to clarify that slightly, the Center of Excellence, we're not associated with any one particular group of IT at Transport. At Transport Canada, we actually have things divided by modes of transportation. So there's a group that's responsible for all the IT work in, say, civil aviation, another responsible for marine safety or marine security. So ideally, when we get asked to build a system for whatever reason, we would like those teams to take over the maintenance. So by having someone join our group temporarily as an embedded developer, they'll learn about Power Apps and the system. So when it gets handed back over, it's a smooth transition to maintenance. That's worked very well. Some teams are very excited about learning Power Apps, others not as much, but we're working on it. One second here. Right, okay. Data loss prevention. Oh my goodness. Is it? I don't know. Again, unfortunately, we're not in a group where I can ask for a show of hands because we're in actually all in the same boardroom together or same same conference room. But if any of you have tried data loss prevention, I would love to hear what your experiences were, because we've recognized that it's going to be very valuable to apply the data loss prevention possibilities that Microsoft's toolkit infrastructure, shall we say, offers. We've only started and we've already found, even in the default tenant, there's a whole bunch of people who are already using connectors that the default DLP would have excluded. So if you're using Power Apps, it's probably already happening. I'm not talking about the connectors that go to, say, something in SQL Server or Excel or goes off to Power BI. We're talking about here the connectors that do something with Adobe, or there's one that does translations. Now, translations is very tempting for our side of things because we, again, are obliged to have everything in English and French, and the translation process, pardon me, can be arduous. However, just because it's easy doesn't make it okay, because we have rules about who's approved in translations. So are these translations official? Do they meet the requirements set out by the legislation? Probably not. The other wrinkle for us, less important for you in the United States, but I will mention it because it's an issue for us, is that we're supposed to keep our data on sovereign soil. Some of these connectors, well, they're sending information off to somewhere. Where's the somewhere? It's probably not in Canada. I can see that might be an issue for you as well, though, because you want to make sure somebody's not using a connector that's spuriously siphoning data off to somewhere outside of the States. So there's some security questions there. We're still working on it. I'll be honest, we don't have the answers yet. Our plan right now is to give people about 6 months grace period where they come to enterprise architecture and security and prove to them why they should use the connector. And if the connector's okay, great, we'll add it to the DLP. If they need to be on the approved list, if there's a special situation where they should have it, okay, then they go on the second list and we customize it. But we're not going to go through all 400 ourselves. We don't have the resources. And this will ideally allow us to make sure we're addressing a potential security risk. Because my goodness, there's some connectors out there that I would really rather not be used. All right, so what have we spent a lot of our time doing? Fighting fires. Despite our best efforts, there's problems that crop up. There's difficulties we find out. I mentioned earlier that we're across a very large country with not a lot of people. We have different regions for our department, and sometimes they have problems that they have not had a solution for literally years. So we get called in and we have to fix problems fast. Our previous associate deputy minister, who was our CIO, we used to joke, his name was Raj, that he had something called the Raj button, that every time somebody said they had a problem, he said, "No worry, Pace will fix it." There goes the Raj button, off we go. It was exciting times, but it did certainly result in some satisfaction because we had some big wins as a result. My team's earned a reputation, and well-deserved, the rest of being conceded, of that if there's a problem, we can probably fix it. A good example I can give you that's very recent is that if any of you have been to Toronto, we have an airport there called Pearson, which is pretty big by any standard and very large by Canadian standards. And it unfortunately earned a reputation during COVID as being a very poor place to travel because of the backlogs, delays, and difficulties. Well, we were called in to help with at least one part of it, in that there are hundreds and hundreds of access points in the terminals, and they had an inspection process that, I am not exaggerating, they would have to print off things by paper after using a spreadsheet, walk around from place to place, fill out the paper, then walk back to a dedicated terminal in another section of the building and enter everything in by hand. Each inspection cycle was taking 40 hours. Well, didn't somebody from our team go and work with them, build them a nice Canvas app with a model-driven backend, where the model-driven backend populates the inspection criteria. Everybody's got it on their phone. It works offline if they need to. They go around using their phone. They inspect everything. They take pictures with their camera. Ecstatic. These processes went from 40 to between 7 and 8 hours, which is a pretty huge increase. Pretty huge improvement, pardon me. So that really, really helped free up the inspection cycles and helped them out at the airport. They actually won, I'm happy to say, this year's Transformation Award at the National Award ceremony. So we're working pretty hard to try and solve those things. Intake and assessment. We've also found that, to channel my university economics, there's infinite demand for finite supply. We want to help everybody. We just can't. And it became pretty clear pretty quickly that a good way to try and explain to people when we would get to them or why we couldn't get to them right this second was to have a uniform and consistent process for intake, in that we have everybody fill out, unsurprisingly written in Power Apps, a questionnaire. It asks them, how many people does it affect? Is your need required by legislation or acts of parliament? How private priority is it? What are we fixing? How big of a scale? It doesn't talk at all about technology. It's just tell us what your problem is. And every answer has a score associated with it. And then we sit back and I get to meet with them. And I say, look, this is where you scored. You're number 4 in line. We will be happy to get to you after the 3 bigger fires are taken care of. And we find that folks are very understanding once you explain to them where the situation is. And then there are people who never score very high. And I keep an eye on how long they've been in the system, and that if somebody's waited a year, if I can spare somebody to help them out, then I will, because we're mindful of the fact that some groups simply don't get funding and don't get attention for various reasons. If they're not high priority for whatever reason, they probably don't get that support, and that doesn't make it any less useful to help them. So that's where we try to factor that in. And that intake system caught the attention of other groups, or actually we brought it to the attention of other groups, suggesting that perhaps other COEs could use this process, because if somebody comes to PACE and says, hey, can you build us something? Our answer is yes, of course. And then we say, well, naturally it's in Power Apps. Well, if you perhaps like Appian better, guess what? Everything's built in Appian. And then we also have some folks who are absolutely never, ever going to use anything other than custom.NET, because Power Platform steals people's babies. So having all the COEs work together is our goal, in that we focus solely on intake though. Tell us what your problem is. And then we'll move on to the assessment section, where we're going to have a little bit more of a fulsome discussion, shall we say, about what's the right technology. One of the other things I want to mention, I'm coming close to the end now, is that our successes, or a good piece of advice I would say, is getting that word out. And what I mean by that is, how do you get your center of excellence out to people so they know what you're doing and how to do it? That can also help you in that we've encountered, because we're a government organization, and again, caution is important, we've had people who are really, really resistant to Power Platform, to be honest. They've coded in .NET for, 20 years, and that's all that ever should be. So helping to overcome that reticence is also an important thing. Online resources. We had a web page that was available to, actually was a special page for government and government-wide. It's a little old now, so we're going to update it, but that was welcome and well received because it provided information for everybody. We're going to be building a new SharePoint site going in production in another month for everybody in the department. They're welcoming that too, because we try to, again, provide as much as we can to help people go in the right direction. We don't do training because we don't have the resources, but we don't want to reinvent the wheel either, because frankly, there's so much great stuff online supplied by Microsoft and others that at least if we can point them in the right direction, that's a great start. A Teams channel. It seems like a small thing, but having a dedicated channel just for for Power Apps discussions has proven to be very, very useful. Often it's somebody on my team who's helping, but that said, we've seen multiple occasions where somebody who was another developer working on a team that had nothing to do with us, they responded to offer information to help solve the problem. We're also finding that, again, we try not to indulge in excessive hubris. Just because we haven't thought of it doesn't mean it isn't a good idea. So if somebody else has a good idea, they'll put it on that channel and we'll go, that's fantastic. Community of practice. We're hoping to spin up this fall a community of practice. Anybody who's interested is welcome to come. They'll help set the agenda. We're very mindful again about the difference, the dichotomy between citizen developers and professional developers. So we fully anticipate that the subject matter will definitely affect who comes, but that's okay. We'll make sure we cover both groups. And something very excited about working with Microsoft Canada is we're hoping again in the autumn to have our first hackathon, something that's going to focus on citizen development, something out there in the region focused as well, because we have a lot of people here in the Ottawa region, in the national capital. The majority of our IT people are there, but that's not where the rank and file are doing the field inspections and all the work out in the region. So we're going to try very hard to encourage and get involved those regions so they don't feel left out. Right. Okay. Final thought. By what I want to say, if there's anything, if any of this I hope was useful to you, and I hope it was, is that in the last few years, especially in the context of my peculiar situation, in that there's only so much you can do with the time that you have, is that it's really important for two things. So I suppose final thoughts is that try and go in the direction of the current, by which I mean, if you're talking about Power Apps in a writ small, use those built-in interfaces, configure, don't custom, because if you paddle with the current, you'll go a lot faster than going against the current. And there's a very, very, very strong current in any low code platform out there. And the second thought is whether it's a COE or you're building the COE, maintaining your COE, dealing with DLP, try and go up that flight of stairs 1 or 2 steps at a time. We only succeeded because we had a great project, which then led us to try to launch the COE, and the small efforts with the COA led us to a bigger COA. So what I'm saying is that some groups have approached us saying, well, we want to start from nothing to having a fully run COE and churning out applications. That would be so much more difficult. I don't see how I could have done it, probably a better person than I could, but it's still more work and much more challenging. And to get the buy-in from your executive and all those things, if you try to go from 0 to 40, 0 to 100, shall I say, or that whole flight of stairs. And don't despair going up those couple of steps at a time, because you'll still get there. I mean, the PowerCap maturity model, again, do not despair if you're at 500. If you're not at 500 right off the bat, you won't be. You're going to start at 0. And then every step you get there is improving your situation and making things better. So one step at a time.